And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Munchkin Dungeon. Munchkin Dungeon is the board game a board game version of the extremely popular card game Munchkin. Now Munchkin, if you go and look at my reviews, you'll find that I'm not a huge fan of. Munchkin is a silly game, which I get why people like it, where you simply go through a dungeon and try to level up and other people play cards on you, and it is basically based on other people's humor, or the humor that's in the game. And I found that once you are done laughing at this satirical take on Dungeons and Dragons, there's not much of a game left in Munchkin. That being said, I was pretty excited about Munchkin Dungeon, and that's mostly because it's based on Steve Jackson's Munchkin. It's designed by Andrea Chiarvesio and Eric Lang from CMON, and Good Miniatures, a game based on Munchkin. This is not Eric Lang's first Munchkin game. In fact, he made the Munchkin CCG, which lasted for a very short time. So Munchkin Dungeon is a board game that I was not sure on how I would feel about it, but I had high hopes for it. Let's take a look. Players are going to be keeping track of fame in this game, and when somebody hits 20 fame, that's going to end the round. After the game is over, after the final round's finished, you're going to add your fame there to any points on loot cards that you may have collected over the course of the game, subtracting points for shame tokens that you've gotten for dying to monsters, and whoever has the most points is the winner. Each player is playing a Munchkin character, and that character comes with a board. So here's the board for the dwarf. It tells you how many dice you'll roll in combat, if you get a reroll or not, and how much life you have. Players are also going to be increasing in levels over the game. You'll start at level 1, but you can pay 2 coins to go to level 2. And the farther over, you can see going from level 9 to 10 costs 4 coins. Some levels give you fame points. Some increase your life, some increase the number of dice you roll, and you can see here level 1 for the dwarf gives them another re-roll. There's also special abilities that they have, and you'll notice that the stats for each of the different characters, the dwarf, the wizard, the thief, the cleric, and the warrior, they all have different stats. The board is seeded with monsters at the beginning of the game, and on a player's turn, they're going to move from room to room to room until they hit one of these wandering monsters or another character. As players go from room to room, each room that you go through, you might get a reward. So here, when you enter this room, roll 4 dice. I get a coin for each lightning bolt I roll. So why would you not go to more rooms? Because each room that you go into is going to add a certain number of threat. There is a threat pool down here at the bottom of the board, and you'll be adding threat as you go into each room. Once you get to the room that you decide to stop in, each other player, starting with the player to your left, is going to be able to play cards spending the threat. Players will have these threat cards, so there's barrel monkeys I can throw out for a threat. And the next person adds another monster I have to fight, exploding dice for 2 threat. The next person doesn't have to spend any threat to play a potted plant, and the last person plays a lame goblin. That adds a whole bunch of monsters. Not all threat cards are monsters, though. Some are just events. They let you decide what you can do. Someone will move the wandering monsters around. But then a player will have to fight all the monsters players played, plus any wandering monster that happens to be in their room. When fighting a monster, you're going to roll dice equal to your attack, which will be your base attack on your board, plus possibly more for different items and loot cards that you have gotten. Swords do a damage to the bad guys. Shields will block the damage that they do back to you. And the lightning bolts will activate special abilities. So for example here on the warrior, they have a quick attack. A lightning bolt becomes 2 swords. Or berserk, they do a sword for every one of these lightning bolts that's rolled, but then take a damage. And as you get equipment, like this flaming armor here, you can do more things. And the monsters themselves might have stuff on it. Like for example, the Bullrog here, the main boss, will use this lightning bolt on this particular card to add a shield and do a sword damage to you. And a player can die. If you die, you take shame tokens and go back to the beginning. But if you win, you're going to get rewards. Each level has rewards for clearing the room of all the monsters on it, mostly fame points and or getting loot cards, and some monsters themselves. So for example, if I defeat this floating nose here, I'm going to get 4 coins because that's the room that it's in, and also the floating nose itself gives me 2 coins. While if I defeat the net troll, I'm going to get 2 coins from the monster, and from the room it's in, 4 stars, 4 fame points. As monsters are defeated, they are placed here in these spots, but when you need to place a third one, then the other 2 get respawned out. So the monsters are going to continue to come out and attack players. That's basically it. There's a possibility a player can turn into a super munchkin and get a special board. There's all sorts of loot that players can get that they'll be able to equip, armor and weapons, or find items like this green meeple, which is worth 1 for each color meeple you have in play. So there's all sorts of things that you can get. You will draw up to 4 of these threat cards at the end of your turn so that you can play them on other people on their turns. And there's going to be some diversity in the different cards that come out here. There's even another boss, the dragon, if you want to fight them. The components for this game are fine. Now realize they don't come painted. My daughter painted these. I think she did an absolutely fantastic job. But the miniatures are your typical silly Munchkin miniatures that are brought to life. The card quality is okay. It's your typical come on quality for that. The tokens are fine and the art is fine. I might complain that there's a little less variety. I mean, yes, if you back the Kickstarter, there's a whole lot of extra stuff to get for this game, but I feel like they could have added at least more cards, and some of the cards here in these decks was the same. I would have preferred maybe if every single piece of loot be different, but I'm just being more pedantic on that. I think it's fine. Everything fits inside a plastic insert that comes with the game. One component that I like to mention here would be the rulebook itself. The rulebook is okay. I felt like it could have explained things more clearly, and whoever wrote this rulebook seemed more enthused about putting humor in it than they did about writing a good rulebook. It got to the point where it was like, I get it, you're funny. I'd rather the humor be in the game maybe necessarily than the rulebook. It did not work for me in this particular game. If someone asked me about this game and like, so what's Munchkin Dungeon like, I would say, it's Munchkin the board game, because it really is. There's a lot of similarities. You're trying to level up. Everyone else is playing bad cards on you. But there are some benefits here that are better than the original Munchkin. There's still some things I was like, kind of like, you know, you get the Munchkin character card. How nice for you. That really helped you level up, and you can find great equipment and things. But at the end of the day, you're pushing your luck. The farther down and the faster you move, the more points you get, but the more negative stuff other players are going to play on you. And the more negative stuff they play on you, the harder it is for you to win the combat. Now, the combat, oddly enough, is not so much, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it's going to be like lots of the combat that we see in typical Command games. It's actually fairly similar to a Fantasy Flight combat. The lightning bolts almost is lifted directly from the Descent series of games, which is fine, I guess. I really like that series, and I like the dice combat in this game. I like that you have a certain number of dice, and you have all these special abilities that you can activate with them. Now, since they copied the Fantasy Flight attack system, they also copied the Fantasy Flight method of not giving you enough dice in this game. That's going to be one thing that most people are going to find quite irritating, because you roll your dice and then the bad guys roll this. You guys say, okay, remember we have 3 swords and 2 shields. And okay, you roll that. How many swords and shields do we have again? It'd be so much easier if both sides could just roll their dice and line them up next to each other. That would be my only mechanism problem with that. I just put more dice in your games. The miniatures are really cool, and there's a lot of extra content for this game if you want it. If you like Munchkin, I really feel fairly safe saying you're going to like this. If you don't like Munchkin, but you like the humor, I think you'll like the humor of this. I mean, who can't love a gigantic nose hair that is supported on snot pouring out? Yes, that's juvenile, and yes, I was amused by it. And yes, I'm amused by the fact that one of the monsters in this game is an accountant. So that humor is there, and I feel like the game is stronger. The game is stronger because you can push your luck a certain degree. There's ways to manipulate the dice. You get to decide where you go. And while Munchkin feels like a huge luck fest, because it is, this one has a lot of feelings of Munchkin, but also has a stronger, cooler board game feel. In short, this is the game I want Munchkin to be. I like this one. Now, I don't love it. It's still fairly light. My kids enjoyed it. There's a lot of take that in it. And if you don't like to take that and all the crazy things that are going to happen, you aren't going to be super enamored with this one. But the great miniatures mixed with a funny, silly theme, mixed with funny, silly gameplay that offers you some good decisions and a nice combat dice system make Munchkin Dungeon superior to the original card game and everything but price. So there you go. I know a lot of people are going to pass this one by. And honestly, if your first instinct when you see this is, then I would not even try to dissuade you. You're like, I don't really like Munchkin. Like, all right. But if you said, well, I'm not a huge fan of Munchkin, but maybe I like this, I'd say, well, there's a chance. Because that's what it was for me, and I enjoyed it. I don't hate Munchkin. I like the idea of Munchkin better than the game of it. The idea of Munchkin's still here, but now we have a better game to go along with it. There's more stuff for this I'll be reviewing later this week, all the little extra stuff that they put out in the Kickstarter and things. But this is just based on the base game here, albeit a marvelously painted by my daughter game. But that's Munchkin Dungeon. I'm Tom Vasel. We'll see y'all next time. Dice Tower Judgment, approved for silly people.